Nina. I'm the executive director of the Aspire Institute, and many of you have either already gone through our program, or maybe you're currently enrolled in our program or are thinking about enrolling in the program. We welcome you all. Aspire Institute was co-founded by two Harvard Business School faculty members in 2017. We spun out as an independent nonprofit 2 years ago so that we can reach you all and reach students globally. The Aspire Leaders program offers a 14-week, 5 hours a week commitment, 3 modules focused on developing your leadership skills. And so through the combination of coming together on a platform that connects you all, you learn from each other, you are able to make an impact in your local community. We're running 3 cohorts this year. The first cohort is already in their last module. The second cohort application deadline is March 21. So if you've not applied yet, please visit our website. The application should be available there. If you know of others, you can encourage them to apply. So we'll look forward to receiving your application. So let me welcome you to our Distinguished Speakers Series, where we celebrate innovation, entrepreneurship, and visionary leadership. Authors Bennis and Thomas write that everyone is tested by life, but only a few extract strength and wisdom from their most trying experiences. They're the ones we call leaders. Today, we will hear from an extraordinary individual whose journey is a demonstration of the power of dreams, determination, and of making a difference in the world. Marcelo Claure is the CEO and founder of the Claure Group and a major supporter of the Aspire Institute. Marcelo started with a humble beginning in Bolivia, where he was born and raised, and through his tenacity and hard work has become a leading global entrepreneur who has transcended borders and cultures to make a lasting mark in the world. He founded Brightstar, turning a startup into world's biggest global player in wireless distribution and services company. His leadership propelled Brightstar to unprecedented heights, resulting in its acquisition by SoftBank. Marcelo was the CEO of SoftBank Group International, making investments in companies that are shaping the future of technology, telecommunications, and other high-growth sectors. Marcelo also led the merger of Sprint and T-Mobile and serves on the board of the new T-Mobile. May I please request you all to mute so that we can hear our speaker? Thank you. So Marcelo is a man with many talents. He's passionate about sports, and he's the owner of Club Bolivar, Bolivia's most popular football team, and co-owner of Girona Football Club in Spain. He has a huge heart. It's confirmed by our Aspire team and his daughter Sienna, who interned with us last summer. His philanthropic activities have helped us make Aspire Leaders program available for free to many talented first-generation college youth. He is also committed to getting the internet to every corner of Latin America and the Caribbean. Today, Marcelo will share his journey with us, the ups, the downs, about making tough calls and gathering the courage to pick himself up, dust off, and keep moving. Marcelo, please accept our warm welcome from the Aspire community.
Thank you, Mina. God, you make me look so intelligent in that introduction, so thank you. Let me start by saying that it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm glad we're able to find time for me able to share with so many of you my journey, and I'll give you some of my things that have worked for me. I want to talk about the mistakes that I've made, because there are plenty of those, and it's an honor to be able to talk to people all over the world, as that's not an easy task to put it all together. So thanks, Mina, for putting all this together. let me start by saying that I'm a huge believer in what Aspire is doing. It didn't take him a long time to convince to get me engaged, because I just think it's such a noble mission, as I'm a huge believer that education is what changes countries, what changes people. And I will start by saying that, I came from a middle-class family, and my father basically saved his entire money. He was a diplomat working for the United Nations, and he saved his entire savings to basically achieve his objective, which was to send his 3 kids to school. And I found it pretty honorable. A man who's worked all his life extremely hard to just, his entire goal was make sufficient money to be able to pay for education. And what he used to always tell me, and still tells me, is, if I send you money, you're always going to spend it. But if I invest in education, you're going to take that all the way to the grave. And that's going to be a gift that's going to basically allow you to live life more fully if you're a properly educated person. So when I met with Karim and I met with Yumin, I explained me the mission of Aspire to be able to basically take this education to all corners of the world. It wasn't hard for me to be part of the Aspire family and not only contribute financially, but be able to contribute my time and hopefully be able to make this a better program. But I'll start by sharing my story. I'm from Bolivia. Bolivia is a small country in Latin America. It's probably one of the poorest countries. We're usually fighting Haiti to see which one is the poorest country in Latin America. And Bolivians traditionally are people who don't believe in themselves. So it was rare, to have an entrepreneur. Like from the day I was born, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And I always knew that I wanted to be an entrepreneur that was outside of Bolivia, because I always thought that I could take everything I learned to parts of what was outside Bolivia. And life is full of moments, opportunities that are given to all of us. And I think the big difference between people is those who are able to take advantage of those opportunities, because every single one of you in the phone is going to be one that's going to be given opportunities in your life. And I think over 99% of people decide to continue with their life and not take advantage of those inflection points. Mine was, the biggest opportunity was my father, basically paying for my education at school. I went to school in Boston. I didn't get into Harvard, but I got into a good school called Bentley, which is a school for business. And it was a very expensive school. So it was a big piece of my father's salary went there. And, I didn't have enough money to have the same fund that all other students did. So my first business I started was buying and selling frequent flyer miles out of my dorm in the school. And I used to buy frequent flyer miles. I used to convert them into tickets. And I used to be basically a travel agency selling tickets to students and selling tickets to everybody that I knew. And that allowed me, I would say, to supplement my income in order for me to be able to be like any other normal student. And at the same time, it allowed me to test my entrepreneurial skills. And thank God the business worked pretty good. And, by the last year of college, I had an apartment and I had about 17 people basically working out of my apartment, buying frequent flyer miles, delivering tickets, and so on. So I got my entrepreneurial spirit young on me. Then, unfortunately, the U.S. immigration system is not the best. Meaning, if you graduate, the U.S. wants you out as fast as possible. In many cases, they might give you 1 year of practical training, but the overall spirit is you would come, you study, and then you go back to your country, which I think it's a pity, because I think the U.S. should be more welcoming to people who study in the U.S., but that was the course of immigration. So I took a plane back to Bolivia, to my home country, and that was my first inflection point. I met somebody in the plane who, by the time we landed in Bolivia, he offered me the job to be the number 2 person in the Bolivian Soccer Federation, which it was a job that didn't pay anything because the Bolivian Federation was broke. But he had a huge dream, and that was, I want to take Bolivia to the World Cup for the first time in the history of my country. And as a big dreamer that I am, I immediately sympathized with that, and I accepted the job. My parents were a bit upset. They said, we spent all this money to educate you in a good, prestigious university in the US, and you take a job in the Bolivian Federation, which wasn't necessarily a prestigious job, and was a non-paying job because the federation was broke. But what that taught me is that every big journey begins with a big dream. And Guido, who was the president of the federation, had an enormous dream, and that was we want to take Bolivia to the World Cup. We started the journey. We hired a coach from outside of Bolivia. We hired a psychologist who basically, this coach psychologist ran a comparison with Bolivians and basically taught Bolivians that they could be as capable as Brazilians and Argentinians, which make the best soccer players. But the biggest problem with Bolivian players wasn't necessarily the lack of skill sets, but the biggest problem with Bolivian players was the fact that they didn't believe in themselves and they couldn't dream big. So for the first 60 days, we didn't practice kicking soccer balls. We just practiced believing in ourselves and teaching us that we could be as capable as a Brazilian player and Argentinian player. To make a long story short, after a few months, but it was the first time in the history of my country, Bolivia, that we made it to the World Cup. It was the first time that Brazil lost a qualifying game that was against us. And as you can imagine, the whole country was in a huge party, as it was the first time in a country that had been trying for 70 years to make it to the World Cup that we actually made it. And it wasn't enough to make it to the World Cup, but we got lucky that we got to play the first game in 1994. We opened the World Cup against Germany, and it was an incredible experience for players. It was an incredible experience for my country to be able to, that we're able to showcase, our skills, and it gave a huge boost to the entire country. The fact that the Bolivians were able to do something that never been done before. So that was my first job. It was fascinating. It taught me to dream big. And then I moved back to the United States. I moved back to the United States because I wanted to work in the United States. And I went for a job interview. And my first job interview was to Merrill Lynch. And, it was easy for people to get excited because I told the story of taking Bolivia to the World Cup. So they asked me for my mobile number for the next interview, and I didn't have one. I didn't have a mobile phone. So I went running to a store to try to get a mobile phone. And I met the owner of a store who was looking to sell the business. And I went in looking for a cell phone. And by the time I walked out, I had convinced him to sell me the store, and I was going to pay him in due course. And now on my first entrepreneurial journey, I started at one store. We grew to having many, many stores all over the United States. We started in Boston. We moved up the Northeast coast, and we went down all the way down to the Southeast of the United States. And we invented the concept of people calling and us being able to deliver a phone. Okay, and we're able to deliver phones to people's homes. And we used to have thousands of drivers stationed with phones in their cars, and people used to order phones and deliver them, and we broke all sales records. And a couple of years later, I was able to sell that company. And it was my first, end-to-end entrepreneurial journey, where I bought a little store, grew it to over 150 stores, changed the business model by having thousands of drivers stationed all over the United States with phones. And it was a tremendous success. But what really bothered me was, as big as I was, we had to buy our phones from distributors. And there were two big distributors. One was called Brightpoint, the other one was called Cellstar. They were both global. And they were terrible at selling phones. They could never deliver stuff on time. We never knew when our phones were. So I figured that if they were that bad in the United States, there was an opportunity to start a company. And I started a company called Brightstar as a mobile distribution company. I started in Miami. We were a small group of people. And from day one, we set up a dream that says we will build Brightstar to be the world's largest distribution company. Everybody thought we were crazy. Everybody said, it's impossible. You're just starting from zero. It's a game that requires a lot of capital. But we knew that if we were good to our customers, we knew that we had a chance. So we started in Miami. We quickly expanded to Latin America. We moved into the US market. Then we moved into Europe and India and China and the rest of the world. And it took us 12 years to grow Brightstar from zero to surpassing $10 billion in revenue and becoming the world's largest wireless distribution company. The company kept innovating, began as a distribution play. Later on, we developed our skill sets to be a supply chain solutions company. I see there's a lot of people in Africa here. We were large in Africa. We managed all of end-to-end supply chain. We're in 12 African countries. And we were in India. We managed all the parties business. We were in the United States. We were all over the world, in which companies started to outsource their supply chain to us because we were pretty good at managing supply chain. The company was very successful. Again, it felt very good to be number one in the world when you started something from scratch. And then I had my next big opportunity. I was in a trade show in Barcelona, and I went outside because somebody had missed a meeting, and I met somebody from Japan. I told him my story, and he told me that it was going to be very good if I could meet his boss. And his boss is somebody that most of you in the technology world will know, the guy known as Masa or Masayoshi Son, who was the started SoftBank. A few months later, I went to meet Masa, and we got along pretty good. And he asked me if I would sell in my company. At that point, Brightstar was $12 billion in revenue, 17,000 employees, 70 countries. And I asked him why he wanted to buy my company, and he told me he didn't care about my company, but that he wanted to buy my company so I could become the CEO of a business that was losing a lot of money, a business called Sprint in the United States, a very large telco, and that he thought that I would be capable of fixing that company. And I was curious and asked him why would he think that I could be capable of doing something like that. That was way above my pay grade. I was a merchant. I could buy cheap, sell more expensive, but running a large telco with something like 50 million customers in a market like the US was daunting to me. And he told me, look, you're a street fighter, you're a big dreamer, you know how to win. So if you're willing to run Sprint, I'm willing to buy your company. Big decision, because I loved being an entrepreneur and running my own destiny. But I always it always bothered me that there was never any Hispanics running the large Fortune 100 companies. And, I sold my company, and I landed in Kansas City to basically go run Sprint. And Sprint was a telecommunications company in the US, large, 40 to 50 million customers. But I've been losing $5 billion for the last 7 years. And, and I became what I call an intrapreneur. I became an entrepreneur inside an enormous company. We had over 100,000 employees. It was enormous. And I applied the same practice, that I did as an entrepreneur. I figured out what is it that we needed to do. One, we had to do a very large cost reduction. Secondly, we needed to reinvent Sprint. We need to have a good value proposition that was different than our competitors, which were AT&T and Verizon. And I made every single store manager be a CEO of its stores. And I made every single employee at Sprint a partner, meaning we gave them a stock in the company. And it was amazing. In no course, in 3 years, the company started making money. We went from losing millions of customers to gaining millions of customers. And it's amazing what happens when your employees believe in themselves, and when employees, they're all aligned on what we were out to do. And it's probably one of the most documented stories of a turnaround. We went from, again, losing $5 billion to making $5 billion. But more importantly, we gave a life to a company that was potentially in the verge of going bankrupt. We knew that in order for us to even be stronger, that we needed to find a partner. So we went in the next journey, which was to merge the company with T-Mobile. Everybody told me it was impossible to merge the number 4 and number 3, and that the government were never going to approve something like that. Us entrepreneurs, when you tell us no, is what gets us more excited. We embarked in the journey of the merger. It took 1.5 years. It took me to be part of congressional hearings, 3 times, being grilled by Congress people in the US. And I think the value proposition for the US was so strong that said that if you believed in us, we were going to force our competitors to also invest, and it would allow the US to keep 5G leadership in the world and not lose it to China. Against all odds, our merger got approved, and then the new company, the one that we merged, which was player number 3 and player number 4, became today what is the world's most valuable telecommunications company in the world. The new T-Mobile is valued more than any other telco in the world. And it felt pretty good, how to have a company that was almost in the verge of bankruptcy to today being part of what is the world's most valuable telecommunications company in the planet. And it felt good to be part of creating now not one, but 2 world champions, two companies that were number 1 in the world. First Brightstar and now T-Mobile. My next journey was to become an investor. And as I tried to quit my job, my boss Masa told me that I was a very good operator, that I have been able to build, to turn around Sprint, and I was also a good entrepreneur that allowed me to create Brightstar from zero. But he reminded me that I was not an investor and I didn't know how to invest. So he promoted me to be the CEO of SoftBank International, and I moved to Tokyo to be part of, probably the most exciting tech investment firm in the world, SoftBank. At that point in time, we're ready to launch the 100 billion Vision Fund, which was the largest Vision Fund or largest fund ever created. We were bigger than all the tech funds put together. And we did that because we had a huge belief that artificial intelligence was going to change the world, and that companies that knew how to use data were going to beat companies that didn't. And it was an incredible journey. A lot of the companies that today you use to transport yourself, to have food delivered to you in your mobile phones, a lot of the companies that today, if you use TikTok, or I can go on, or if you buy clothes from Shein, those are all the companies that we invested in. And we pretty much, fair to say, that we created most of the disruptors in the world today. And we gave opportunities to people who in the past didn't have a chance because they didn't have sufficient capital. We took the fund to Latin America, something that I'm very proud of, because Latin American entrepreneurs, were as good as other entrepreneurs, but they never had a chance to compete because they were never given a chance with the appropriate capital. We did that in China. We're the largest shareholders of Alibaba, and so on. We used to invest to the tune of $1 billion a week, and that was the launch of the Vision Fund. 2 years ago, I decided that it was time for me to be an entrepreneur again. I quit my job. I left because even thought I had probably one of the most fascinating jobs in the world. I was still an employee, and I wanted to be back at being an entrepreneur. Now I've launched my own investment firm. I basically put my name on it. That's why it's called Claure Group. And I'm having the time of my life, basically investing behind entrepreneurs, helping entrepreneurs scale their business, and putting my capital to work, putting my experience to work, helping entrepreneurs, and putting my connections and my contacts to work. So we manage a substantial amount of capital. And, it's probably, there's no better feeling at controlling my destiny and being back an entrepreneur and having done the full cycle of being an entrepreneur, moving to being a public company CEO, learning how to be an investor, and now back at doing what I love most, which is helping entrepreneurs. There's 5 basic rules that I always tell people. What has made you successful? And I will say, first is you always got to dream big. And even when I started my little company, Brightstar, selling phones from the back of my car, I always knew at the end my dream was to be number 1 in the world. When I took the job at Sprint, which was driving a company that was on the verge of bankruptcy, I always had a dream. I say, even though people don't believe in us, the end of Sprint is going to be part of the world's biggest company. Maybe we're not the world's biggest, but we're the world's most valuable, which is as precious as that. And the second one is I tell people to don't be afraid to take risk. Most of us sit in a comfortable place, and we have a job, and we're happy with that. And I always tell, always stretch yourself, always, take risk, because with risk, big rewards come. Third is the only way you're going to be successful in life is to always do what you love, right? There's too many people that are unhappy with their life because they spend most of the days in jobs or they're not happy. And it doesn't matter whether you choose to be an entrepreneur or whether you choose to be an executive or whether you choose to be a teacher or whether you choose to be stay at home, whatever you decide, the only way you're going to achieve success is basically to do what you love. Fourth, I always get in trouble, especially with my kids, and I always tell people, I still have not found a substitute to working hard. I was, I didn't have the luxury of being educated at Harvard or a place like that. And I always had, most of my employees are Harvard educated people or Stanford educated people. And whatever that knowledge that I didn't have, I always supplemented by working hard. Because in life, you have to be lucky. And I say luck comes more times the harder you work. So you have more opportunities to be lucky. So I've always been one of those CEOs who work harder than all my employees. And I always led by example, by, hey, if you're going to ask your employees to work hard, you got to work harder than your employees because employees are not going to respect you if you ask people to work hard, but you don't work hard. And to me, there's no substitute to working hard. And fifth, and more importantly, is don't give up. Man, this entrepreneurial journey has so many, and life as a whole is just a roller coaster of emotions, a roller coaster of victories and defeats. And most people will choose to give up and go back to the comfortable living. And I think, never give up. So I'll summarize with, hey, dream big. Don't be afraid to take risk. Always do what you love. Don't be afraid to be the hardest working person and never give up. And if you follow that, the odds of things going your way are much harder than if you just have small dreams, don't work hard, don't be happy with what you do, and give up at your first chance. So I think it's enough about me. I love, to make this interactive, and we'll ask Mina or any of you if you guys have any questions. I'm happy to answer. There's no, don't be afraid to ask any questions that you want. I'm lucky to always dream big, including my family. I'm a father of 6. I have 5 girls and 1 boy, and that's probably one of the the biggest jobs that I have today. Is how to raise not necessarily smart kids, but raise good human beings, right? And people that are going to contribute more to this world than you take away from this world. Anyway, happy to take any questions. So if it's you, Mina, or if it's anybody of the people that we have in this big Zoom, I've never seen a Zoom with so many people, and everybody's so quiet. I don't know if you mute everybody up or people are just so polite.
Well, we did have to mute people, but we will unmute them as they ask questions. But before that, Marcelo, thank you so much. That was just such a wonderful sort of story that, you took us through your personal journey, and really we could feel as you were talking about these different, call it experiments, call it risk that you were taking, everything from starting with your college dorm, which was, I think, a stroke of genius. And you already had it in you to where you ended up today with the Claure Group. So, I mean, that was great. I think the way we'll sort of do the Q&A session is I'll just ask you one question because I'm dying to hear from you. You've described this journey to be your journey. And we all know that no matter how successful you are, there are people behind you who contribute to your success. It can be in the form of a teacher, it can be in the form of a mentor, it can be a form of, a boss in your life. And I was wondering, along these different paths, who do you remember most vividly as someone who was there for you in times when you were taking risk, someone who believed in you?
So there are different mentors in different phases of our lives, right? And we got to take advantage when those opportunities come along, right? And I don't believe in the role of, I hate when people ask me, hey, Marcelo, would you be my mentor? And I get hundreds of emails of people asking that. I said, because a mentor is not a generalist. It's a different face. And I think growing up, my father was by far my biggest mentor because I saw him work so hard with a clear mission from day one. I mean, I'm privileged to have a father who, on day one, he told us, look, I might not be able to provide you the same quality of life that your friends have because I'm saving money to be able to pay for your university education. And it was amazing to see God, you saw a man who was a geologist working in the United Nations who worked his butt off with only one mission, and that is I want to educate my child because that is the gift that I can give my children. And in the meantime, him didn't take any luxuries or vacations and other things that he should have just to make sure we're educated. So it's hard not to be inspired by your father, right?
Mm-hmm.
My second mentor was a guy called Guido Loaiza, who was the president of the Bolivian Soccer Federation, because he taught me to dream big. I mean, I don't tell the whole story because people think we're crazy. We were in the plane flying back to Bolivia, and I was just lucky to sit next to this man. He basically looked at me and said, hey, we're going to win the next World Cup. And I looked at him and said, but you're crazy. I said, first we have to make it to the World Cup. We've been trying for 70 years. And by the way, we happen to play Brazil and Argentina to qualify, and Colombia, which they're amazing teams. And he taught me a lesson. He said, look, if you dream to win the World Cup, we're actually going to make it to the World Cup because you dream so big, you might not reach your full dream, but you believe in it. And against all odds, I mean, you can look at articles when Bolivia made it to the 1994 World Cup. We were always fighting for last place in Latin America. So Guido has been an enormous inspiration to me. And he's one of my closest friends still. And he's just a big dreamer. And you can ask any entrepreneur who's been lucky enough to be number one in the world at anything they do, dreaming big is a big component of that. And I applied that to Brightstar. I mean, the day I started Brightstar, when my revenue was $1 and my competitors were 10 billion each, I knew that I would surpass them. And the funny thing is, at the end, they both had to merge to catch up with me. And it was a joy that day that I became a world champion. I was the number one in the world, right? Then, another person that caused an immense impact to me was Steve Jobs. I always wanted to get, I'm one of the creators of what is the buyback and trading industry. You see all those, a multi-billion-dollar industry today that's been created to buy used phones and recycle them and resell them. It all started by myself writing an email to Steve Jobs, a completely blind email in which I wrote him. I said, look, I have this idea of why we should buy those used iPhones so we can give it to people that cannot buy a new iPhone, and you'll sell them a new iPhone. And it took me a lot. And Steve Jobs was amazing because he used to answer back your email. Didn't matter who it was. The email was sjobs@apple.com. And I wrote him, and he wrote me in so fast, no interest. And again, when you're an entrepreneur, the word that encourages you the most is no. No excites us. No to me is, okay, you're putting a challenge in front of me. Right. And at the end, we convinced Apple and Steve Jobs to let us do buyback and trading, to let us buy used phones inside Apple stores. And he was so hard and so perfect and everything he designed. And he cares so much about the customer experience. And he cared about how are people going to feel when they use a used phone that we ended up calling pre-loved. So he was always an inspiration because I found him that, he's probably one of the smartest people that have ever lived in our life. Then, I had a chance to, when I met Massa, Massa was crazy. He said, let me buy your multi-billion-dollar company, but I really don't care about your company. I'm buying you to go fix Sprint. And I thought, this guy's crazy, right? Why would you ever? By the way, I wasn't cheap. Buying Brightstar was not cheap. It was the world's number one company, but somebody was willing to pay for my skills. Don't get me wrong, Brightstar is still a great company, it's a great distributor and all that. But day one, he told me, look, I don't even want you to talk about Brightstar. I want you to put your brains to fixing Sprint. And the Sprint was daunting. I didn't even look at how much money Sprint. I was just so excited to be a public company CEO of a large telecommunications company. And that was Massa. And then, a lot of the fun that we have today, when we call an Uber, Massa was the big founder. was the big that funded Uber. When you look at a TikTok, we invested early on in ByteDance, which is the owners of TikTok. When you use your mobile phone, every single phone in the world uses an ARM design chipset. We invested into ARM. And he was always this big dreamer, and that he's the one behind giving Jack Ma his first $40 million that later became 150 billion for the growth of Alibaba. So I was very lucky. So now this next phase of my life is one that, how do you actually apply everything that I've learned in my life, and rather than me running a company now, is how can I influence many entrepreneurs possible by passing them the learnings that I've had I've been privileged. It's been 30 years of working, I think, doing amazing things, from investing to starting businesses to operating large businesses, and be able to pass that knowledge to other young entrepreneurs, just so they don't make the same mistakes that I've made, and pass on some of my learnings. So that's what I'm doing today. But mentors come in different phases of your life, and there's no such a thing as a generalist mentor. Give me some advice, because who are we to give advice when we're not sitting in somebody else's shoes? We can only provide advice at very specific points in people's lives.
Very fantastic. This is just so helpful for our students to hear, that you just have to keep your eyes and ears open when you're getting advice, and you just never know how it'll show up in your life as you are going through your journey. So I'm going to stop talking now. We have invited a couple of our alums from last year who have specific questions, because these are two young entrepreneurs who have received some seed funding from Aspire. So I'm going to invite them to ask questions, and then we'll open up the floor, because I'm sure we have many other young students who would love to ask you questions, Marcelo. So may I please invite Ana Paula and Amos, and we'll start with Ana Paula. If you can just briefly introduce yourself, and you can ask Marcelo your question.
Thank you. Hi. First of all, I want to thank the Aspire Institute for this inspiring talk, and Marcelo for sharing with us a moment of his personal story. It makes me very proud to see how far we Latinos can go. And yeah, well, my name is Ana Paula Reyes. I study political science in Chile, and Aspire Leaders has helped me to go very far in my leadership, especially regarding working from emotions. And also, my project Earrings won the Social Impact Seed funding and seeks to spread more the biography of Chilean women who made change in our history. My question is, considering your Latino origins and being from my neighboring country, I would like to know, in which way do you honor your Latin American roots in work? Do you have opportunities to represent your culture and embrace your tradition while working, or maybe in your private life, in your food, or playing games and listening to music?
Yeah, so I'll give you a little the Latino story, right? One is, I'm an immigrant to the United States, and you should never forget where you come from. That's rule number one, right? And while I was at SoftBank, and we were deploying $1 billion a week, right? The biggest deployment of capital in the history of the world, it pissed me off that there were never any Latino entrepreneurs coming and asking for capital. It was mainly American, Chinese, and Indian. And it bothered me. So basically, I got in a plane and I went to visit Latin America, and I quickly learned that Latin American entrepreneurs are as good as anybody else in the planet, but they just had no ambition. They were always scared that there was not going to be enough capital. So I convinced Massa to basically grab 8% of the Vision Fund, which was $8 billion, and say, I'm going to deploy that in Latin America. And I was able to prove that Latin American entrepreneurs are as capable as any other entrepreneurs if they're given the same opportunity. So to me, I always go and I always have to go back to my roots. And then living in the United States as a Latino immigrant is fascinating, right? Because people say, oh my God, it's so hard to be Latino or to be Black in the United States. And I always tell people it is the actual opposite. It is much easier because we have an ability to move between the two cultures. We can be as American as any American, and we can be as Latino. So imagine if you have that competitive advantage, that you have two personalities, and you're beating guys and girls who only have one personality. They're either American or not. And I think that has been a competitive advantage to me. But I also take it easy that people, people have a preconceived notion of why Blacks and Hispanics are not as good as white in the United States. So I launched a fund called the Opportunity Fund. That's a fund dedicated only to help Black and Latino entrepreneurs that have great businesses, but that unfortunately the venture capital community don't take them serious. And we launched a fund that was $100 million. Now we are launching fund number 2, which will be $200 million. And the results of fund 1 are amazing. Black and Latino entrepreneurs are as good as any other entrepreneurs as long as they're given the opportunity. So, in everything that I do, I always tell people, don't forget your roots. Never forget where you came from. It's easy in life. You become successful, you do good. And the easiest thing is to forget your roots and forget where you come from. And I think that's the fallacy. I try to teach, I try to take I have 5 girls ranging from 5 years to 25, and I try to take them to Bolivia a couple of times a year. I'm very lucky to own Bolivia's largest soccer team. And I make sure that they all come with me and they're able to understand. It's a joy for me to own this team because I used to skip school when I was in high school to go watch this team practice. And now it's a lot nicer to go and watch my team. But hey, I'm Bolivian. I take my Bolivian roots very serious. I want to help Latino entrepreneurs. And, and as much as I can, try to dedicate the rest of my life to making sure that those Latino entrepreneurs have the same opportunity that's been given to me.
Great, thank you. Imos?
Yes, hello everyone. I am Amos Benjamin, a recent graduate in environmental health and also a sustainability advocate from Malawi. I'm an alumnus of this program and currently leading a social impact project called the Ways to Add Initiative, which is also being funded by the Aspire Institute. So my question is, your dedication to initiatives like the One Laptop Per Child and the 1 Million Project Foundation highlights your deep commitment to social impact and combating education inequality. So what inspired your decision to give back to the community in such meaningful ways? And moreover, how do you recommend individuals from diverse backgrounds adopt your mindset and actively engage in fostering positive change within their own communities? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So I'll give a little story here, right? When I was in the middle of Bright Star, I was very lucky. I got invited by an MIT professor, Nicolas Negroponte, who, again, another huge dreamer, who basically say, unless we provide laptops to kids, kids will not have access to the internet, and then they're never going to be able to compete. So back then, laptops were like $1,500, and the big dream is, can we manufacture a laptop for $100? It was called the original plan was called the $100 laptop, the $100 project. Okay, and by dreaming big, we were able to lower manufacturing costs to $146. We were never able to get it to 100, but suddenly we made these computers that were going to be available for kids to have access to the internet. And you've probably seen the 1 laptop per child, which our dream was that every kid in the world should have access to the internet, and every kid in the world should have the 1 laptop. Everybody fought us. I remember Microsoft, I remember Dell, I remember Hewlett Packard. Everybody tried to block our project because the profit they used to make in laptops were outrageous. And we partnered with the coolest people. My partner in that venture was Sergey Brin from Google. We have the people at AMD. We had Rupert Murdoch. We had Negroponte. And I took it upon myself, basically, with Nicolas to launch this. And success was we deployed over 2 million computers for kids all over the world. Uruguay became the only country where the government bought a laptop for every single one of its kids in the public education. And it was amazing. So when I was running Sprint, most people think the US is a rich country, and it is rich in many areas, but it's poor in many areas. Back then, there's about 5 million kids in the United States that don't have access to the internet. And unfortunately, 90% of those kids are, again, Black or Hispanic. And when they go to school, they're given homework that they have to do it on the internet at home. And then they go home and they have no internet. So what happens? They go outside of McDonald's, they go outside of Starbucks, they go outside of public library, and they try to get free internet. But unfortunately, those are the kids that girls end up, many of them being prostitutes, boys end up being drug dealers, because that's where they go hunt them. That's where bad people go hunt them. And then amazing lives go to waste. And that killed me. And again, it killed me because something in a country so rich as the US, you should not have 5 million families without access to the internet. So being the CEO of Sprint, which is a wireless company, it's a communications company, I came up with a concept that says, why don't we fix it by giving away 1 million free laptops and give away 1 million free internet access to kids that need it. Learned a lot of lessons. One is I called my friends at Apple, I called my friends at Samsung, LG, and I said, I want you to give me all the returned laptops and phones, anything that can connect to an internet. I want you to donate it to this project. And a lot of them did. So we had hundreds of thousands of devices. And a lot of them, to be fair, they gave us new devices. But then, as the CEO of Sprint, I provided the free internet access. And it was fascinating to see the impact we created by providing kids with free internet access. Now, what was terrible was, teachers, and a lot of people blocked it because they didn't like it. I mean, the school system, the US school system needs such huge reform because it's such a mess. But overall, we gave away 1 million free computers, and we saved, I like to call it, 1 million kids. And then when I did the Sprint and T-Mobile merger, I made it a condition to the merger with T-Mobile that we increased from 1 million to 10 million. And we pretty much eradicated the problem of kids don't having access to the internet, because if you don't have the financial means to have access to the internet, T-Mobile will provide you in the United States a free device that connects to the internet and will provide you free internet access. And that to me was fascinating. Something that seemed so impossible to fix, we were able to fix it. And it all started with the dream of why could it's called the homework gap, right? Or some other people call it the digital divide in education, that we were able to solve something like that. So that was a fascinating way. And I'll tell you, it doesn't matter how successful you're in business, the biggest success you get is when you do something good for people and that you're able to see the results that you create. And I still sometimes walk on the streets and people still remember me, and they say, hey, you're the one who gave a laptop to my kid for free. And guess what? My kid went to college, my kid has a job and all that, and that life could have gone the other way. So that's one of the biggest satisfaction of my life is to be able to have done stuff like that.
Great. Thank you, Marcelo, and Amos and Anna, thank you for your questions. Wishing you all the best as you continue your seed fund work, and we're here to support you and mentor you along the way. So now I'm going to open up the floor to folks who've been so patient, and let's start with No Rivera. And Marcelo, feel free to just call folks who got their hands raised so we, don't waste too much time with me interrupting.
Great.
Hello, my name is Noe, and I'm also from Bolivia. It's a great pleasure to meet you, Marcelo. I would like to make two questions, or to ask two questions. The first one is, what things should we build in the social, educational, and personal area if we want to be entrepreneurs to increase our probability of success? And my second question is, well, you were talking about that you were trying to share your experience with people about entrepreneurship. Is there any place or any project where we could find all of the information that you are sharing or trying to share to people from Latin America? Thank you.
So, first of all, the odds of successful entrepreneurs is a tough one, right? Because, entrepreneurs are this rare breed of people who will identify a problem, devise a solution, and then dedicate their life to basically solving that problem. I go back to the things that I always say, right? Being an entrepreneur is probably the toughest job in the world. And it's a roller coaster of emotions and a roller coaster of defeat, of joy and agony at the same time. But, we're entering an era in the world where pretty much every single business, every single vertical, every single thing we do will be different, right? We're entering I call it the artificial intelligence revolution, where suddenly artificial intelligence sits in our hands, sits in our mobile phone. And anybody that wants to be an entrepreneur, right, there has never been a better time in history, because every single thing that happens today is going to be wildly different the next 10 years. The way we work, the way we live, the way we have fun is going to be completely, completely different. So for those of you who have the entrepreneurial bug in your system, never a better time, never more exciting moments to figure out how technology is going to change our lives. So the plethora of opportunities are going to be enormous to basically disrupt what is happening. How can you learn more? There's no such a thing as I'm happy to share stuff with different entrepreneurs. I get a lot of entrepreneurs who reach out with their businesses, and I feel my biggest contribution to good ideas is by giving them my capital and giving them my time. And today I'm an investor. I invest in businesses all over the world. I invest in all sorts of businesses. And I feel that the way I can create a multiplier effect is not by me being an entrepreneur again and creating a new company, but by myself sharing my learnings and my capital with different entrepreneurs who are starting their own business. I think that could be my biggest contribution, to this ecosystem. Next question. I don't know, Mina, if you want to choose them, because I don't know how to.
Okay, why don't I call Titus? If you can introduce yourself, where are you from, and would you like to unmute and ask a question?
Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Marcelo, for your inspiring story just explained. I was actually moved by your spirit, by your journey, your story, because from Africa, Liberia, to be specific, and I see myself as you were actually explaining about your story, your journey. I was actually envisioning myself where I want to see myself, and those things that I been trying to do, and explaining your story, measuring. Then I was just seeing myself in you, explaining your story. Yeah. So but I have one or two questions, and my question here is, with all of those things that you have said, your journey, your inspiring story, what was your greatest challenge or challenges, and how did you overcome those challenges? And what can you say to the young people that with all of those challenges you have overcome, what can we do to see ourselves become successful and able to impact in the society? Because for me, looking at all of what you explained, I'm in similar path, struggling and trying to help young people as well. And it has been difficult for me. So explaining your story is really, really moving. And I hope that I can meet you one day in person, actually, to discuss more. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So first is, and I saw a couple of chats of people talking, and what about us in third world countries? See, I came from a country, Bolivia, that's as poor as a lot of the poor African countries. So to me, we're so lucky today that we live in a connected world that you can start a global business from any part of the world, whether in Africa or in Latin America, etc. Africa will play such an important role in the future of the world because the whole world has stopped growing. Like the US, there's no more growth of people. China is struggling with growth. Japan, the same. Europeans, the same. And the future of the growth of the world is what is called the Global South, which is the African countries that are growing in the amount of population, the African countries where they're growing the potential, the growth creation of a middle class, the Southeast Asian countries like Indonesia, India. So we're going to be lucky to be part of the growth story. And growth means everything in terms of, where the action is going to be. So the fact that you are in Africa today, first of all, it should be a competitive advantage and not necessarily a drawback. Adversity, you're always going to face, right? But adversity gets overcome by hard work and never giving up. I remember when I had to go raise money for BrightStar because we grew so fast. People don't believe me when I told them that I probably got more than 1,000 no's, not 10 no's, 100 no's, 1,000 no's. And, the more people close that door on us, the more motivated that I got to eventually there'll be somebody who believes in what we're doing. And then it's easy because then finally somebody says no. And people are like sheep, right? If one successful person says yes, right, then another one will follow and follow and follow. And then my life got a lot easier. But God, at the beginning, raising money for my venture in the United States was incredibly difficult. But if you have it in you and if your gut tells you that you have the right idea, you have the right concept and all that, you just don't give up. You get strength from the nose. And finally we got a small venture shop that believed and I think gave us the first $20 million, which was the hardest $20 million we ever raised. And then I'll tell you, it got a lot easier to raise the next 100, 200, $300 million because we already had that first believer. And I think that applies to everything, in whatever you do. This not only applies to entrepreneurs, the guys who do well in my companies are people who, again, have big aspirations, work harder than anybody else, are not scared to try different things, are not scared to take risks, and adversity gets beaten by overworking adversity and by never giving up and continuing your dreams. And that has worked for me. So Mina, I apologize tremendously, and I'll tell you guys a story. I was supposed to leave earlier, and I'm currently in Saudi Arabia, and I changed my flight to be able to make this because Mina would kill me if I would have postponed or canceled this conference. So I have to rush to the airport. But I want to thank you, thank you all for paying attention and for hanging out in this Zoom. I'm sure our roads or paths are going to cross. I'm committed to the Aspire mission. And hopefully, the people who've been in this call, I know there are some that went through Aspire. And I think the best way to help Aspire give back to what Aspire has given to you is by word of mouth, by telling other people what you've learned. Because all we need at Aspire is more students who want to learn. And we're so lucky and privileged that you're able to share some of the best education in the world, and we're able to share it all over the world through technology. And soon we'll be meeting. I look forward to going to the sessions where we get to meet face to face, and I look forward to, I'm sure, of the many hundreds of people that were there, I'm sure we're going to have a chance to meet some of you. And I wish you the best of luck in whatever you're doing. Work hard and kick some butt. I'm sure some of you will be, 3 to 4 years from now, I'll be on the other side. I'll be listening, and one of the 400 people who were in the call today, you'll be the distinguished speaker, and we'll all be listening and learning from one of you guys or gals. So thanks again, and hope to meet you soon in person.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marcelo, for that inspiring conversation.
Thank
All
you.
the best. Safe flight.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right. And thank you to our Aspire community for taking the time to be with us today. I hope you got some nice ideas and just inspired by listening to leaders. And I'm sure that we will have a chance to connect again. We will continue to bring inspiring speakers like Marcelo to you, and we look forward to seeing you at our other events. And good luck with those who are continuing their journey and are in our current program today, and those who are thinking of applying or know someone who's a first-generation college student, 18 to 29 years of age, and can benefit from our free program. So all the best and stay strong. Thank you all.